Mithral Hall was the seat of Clan Battlehammer, a dwarven stronghold carved into the mountains of the north of the Sword Coast, deep-tunneled and ancient, ruled by King Gauntlgrym, and worked by generations of stone-hardened dwarves. Bruenor was born into its royal line, grandson of the king, son of Prince Bangor. He was a Battlehammer by blood, and the weight of that name was something he felt long before he fully understood it. 4 adult warriors had gone down a deep mining passage, and only one survivor had returned. Bruenor, not even 30 at this time, and still beardless, organized a mission to seek out the dangers that killed his kin. He carried his father's shield into the tunnels, the foaming mug standard of Clan Battlehammer, and wondered privately whether he had earned the right to bear it. But even then, his courage and his stubbornness guided him. Deep in a tunnel with wounded kin at his side, surrounded by goblins, and facing an Ettin, Bruenor took charge. The hatred between dwarves and goblins was ancient, but Bruenor set it aside and made a truce with them. The massive Ettin was the threat, and he needed them to work together to survive the day. His plan worked, and when the Ettin attacked, it was Bruenor who ran up its back and split its skull with his axe, gaining its first notch and securing the tunnels for his kin. Not so many years after Bruenor's heroics in those tunnels, a shadow came to Mithral Hall. The dwarves had mined too deep in their hunger for Mithral, and what they disturbed cost them everything. Shimmergloom, a shadow dragon, rose from the darkness beneath the hall, and with it came hordes of Duergar. Clan Battlehammer was routed. The great stronghold of their ancestors, built by the first king Gauntlgrym himself, fell. Only a handful of survivors escaped the slaughter. Among them was young Bruenor. Both Gauntlgrym and Bangor had died in the fighting, leaving Bruenor as the living heir to the throne and de facto leader of Clan Battlehammer. He, along with the refugees, took the road north to Icewind Dale, settling in a valley at the foot of Kelvin's Cairn. There they made a new home. They traded dwarven crafted goods to 10 towns and endured the brutal cold of the Dale for 2 centuries. Mithral Hall became legend. But Bruenor never forgot and vowed to one day reclaim his ancestral home. After a goblin raid on a nearby village, Bruenor found a young human girl alone, her parents killed. He took her in as his own, raising her with the clan and teaching her the ways of smithing and dwarven culture. Her name was Catti-brie. Several years later, a drow elf appeared on the outskirts of 10 towns. Catti-brie befriended him and his magical panther, and eventually so did Bruenor, though not without resistance. Dark elves carried a dark reputation, and Bruenor was not a dwarf who ignored history, but Drizzt proved himself again and again in ways that even the most stubborn dwarf in Icewind Dale could not dismiss. Bruenor guarded Drizzt from the prejudice of the 10-towners. Drizzt guarded the Dwarven Valley and everyone in it. This was their foundation, 2 fighters who trusted and respected each other. In 1351 DR, when the barbarian tribes swept down on 10 towns, Bruenor led the dwarves against them. During the battle, he came across a young standard-bearer with the composure of a seasoned warrior. Bruenor hesitated, and the boy dented his helmet with a standard pole before Bruenor knocked him out and moved on. After the battle, a fisherman was about to finish the unconscious youth, but Bruenor stopped him and sentenced the boy to 5 years of labor in the dwarven mines. It wasn't mercy necessarily, but a conviction that something worth preserving was in this young man. Bruenor worked Wulfgar hard, then taught him the forge, then gave him his own anvil. Wulfgar arrived, planning revenge, but left a craftsman. On the night of the summer solstice, Bruenor forged his masterwork, a warhammer of Mithral, its heads inscribed with the symbols of Moradin and Clangeddin, its secret runes etched from an inherited scroll that only revealed itself under a full moon. He named it Aegis Fang, handed it to Wulfgar gruffly at the end of his term, and left the room, wiping the moisture from his eyes. After the next Battle of 10 Towns, when the companions defeated Akar Kessel, Bruenor faked a near-mortal wound and got Drizzt to promise at his bedside to accompany him in the search for his homeland, Mithral Hall, in the spring. road to Mithral Hall was perilous through hostile lands and pursued by a host of villains. Bruenor's memories of the halls were 2 centuries old and incomplete. He knew what it looked like, but he did not know how to find it. Lady Illustrial of Silvery Moon directed them to Harold's Holdfast, an ancient repository of knowledge whose records narrowed the search to a waypoint called Settlestone. Illustrial had also given Drizzt a potion of remembrance, a vial that would send the drinker back into their distant past. Bruenor drank it without hesitation, and it sent him straight to the worst day of his life. He relived the fall of Mithral Hall in real time. Half buried in 200-year-old grief, Bruenor gave them the only map that existed, the one inside his own trauma. When they finally descended into the halls, they found ruin and a single black scale on the floor of the sacred treasury nearly the size of a man. It wasn't the Duergar who had routed his clan, it was the dragon. They fought through to Garam's Gorge, and Shimmergloom, the shadow dragon, rose to meet them. Bruenor found a keg of oil in a storage room. He gave Regis his crown helm, put on his old battered one with the broken horn, soaked a cloak in oil, tied the keg to his back, and jumped from the gorge rim onto the dragon's back, on fire. Wulfgar and Catti-brie hammered Shimmergloom from above until it crashed into the gorge wall, and Bruenor fell with it. Bruenor woke at the bottom of Garam's Gorge on the smoldering corpse of Shimmergloom. Drizzt's scimitar icing death, which he had been carrying on his back, had saved him from the flames. The gorge walls were sheer. His only way out was through the lower mines, through an army of Duergar who were leaderless, enraged, and hunting for whatever had killed their lord. Bruenor rubbed ash onto his face, trying to pass as one of them, and searched for a way out. He made it most of the way through the Undercity before his cover broke. He fought to the furnaces, killing nearly 20 Duergar. Discovering the fire wouldn't hurt him, and started to climb out through a chimney shaft. A giant spider met him in the dark, and he fought it off, fell with it, and landed on it, but started climbing again. Spider venom burned through his arm, his fingers were shredded to the bone. Broken ribs from the fight with the dragon made every movement nearly impossible, but he just kept going. At the top of the shaft, he found an iron gate. Too spent to break fully through, he squeezed halfway and passed out, hanging over a 1,000-foot drop. Illustrial of Silvery Moon found him, healed him, and carried him away to Longsaddle. After some recovery, Bruenor flew Illustrial's flaming chariot along with Catti-brie to meet Drizzt and Wulfgar on the Sea Sprite, helping secure a victory against a host of pirates, after which they rescued Regis in Kalimport. Bruenor then sent word to Citadel Adbar and Icewind Dale and raised a dwarven army. The assault on Mithral Hall was swift. The top level fell in 3 days, the Undercity in 2 weeks. Within a month of setting out, the hammers of Clan Battlehammer were ringing in the ancient halls once again, and the rightful king took his throne. Mithral Hall was alive again. The forges rang in the Undercity, 2,500 dwarves worked the mines and the halls, and craftsmen were carving Bruenor's likeness into the Hall of Kings, his bust taking its place beside the 7 predecessors of his throne. He sat on a stone throne with Wulfgar and Catti-brie flanking him, preparing for the spring trading season. He had General Dagna at his side, 2,000 sworn Adbar soldiers folded into the clan's ranks. The kingdom he had spent 2 centuries fighting towards was real, and it was alive. Then the drow came for Drizzt. Vierna Duerden, the sister of Drizzt and a priestess consumed by Loth's will, had allied with the mercenary company Bregan Dierth to capture her brother and drag him back to Menzoberranzan. She rode into battle on a Drider, a drow warrior fused to a spider's body, and the face of Drizzt's brother Deneen staring out from the bloated form. As Bruenor stripped the Drider of both of its axes and split it open against the stone, he didn't know he was killing Drizzt's own brother. Later in this same battle, a Yochlol in service to Loth had been summoned and threatened the lives of Catti-brie and Bruenor. Wulfgar met it head-on, its teeth working through his ribs, scraping bone. He drove Aegis Fang into the ceiling until it came down on top of them both. When the dust settled, Wulfgar was gone. Bruenor had fought through the drow, killed Danine and won the day, but his son was still dead. Wulfgar's death broke something in Bruenor. Day after day, he sat alone staring into the embers of his fire while Regis maintained the affairs of Mithral Hall. Bruenor had lost an eye in the battle. A scar now ran from his forehead to his jaw, and he refused to let anyone clean the dried blood from Aegis Fang's handle. The king of Mithral Hall had gone somewhere no throne could reach him. After Drizzt and Catti-brie's daring journey to Menzoberranzan and back, the threat of a full-scale drow siege brought Bruenor back to his senses. He directed the fortification of Mithral Hall, sent emissaries to neighboring settlements, making decisions like a king. "Let the damned drow come" became his mantra. When matron Baenri herself led the assault, Bruenor came face to face with the architect of everything he had lost. In his mind, she was the personification of the evil that had taken his boy. His companions were being torn apart around him, and Baenri, surrounded by elite priestesses and a summoned demon, encased Bruenor in a block of magical goo and laughed at him as he strained against it. Then a Glabrazu, sent by Ertu, opened an anti-magic coffer, and for one instant, every enchantment in the tunnel failed. The goo vanished and Bruenor surged forward, charging hard, screaming, axe raised. In all the realms, no creature was more protected by magic than matron Baenri, but the blow came down through her drift disc, through her raised arm, through her skull, through her jawbone and neck, and into her chest, each magical ward burning up through the weapon's handle and into Bruenor's as the axe tore through them all. In that same instant of failed magic, the shackles binding a long-imprisoned old dwarf shattered. Gauntlgrym Battlehammer, the first king of Mithral Hall, Bruenor's ancient ancestor, held captive by Baenri for centuries, tore his chains apart and waded into the fight. Bruenor recognized him instantly without being able to say why. The siege was broken, the drow retreated, and standing in the aftermath, Bruenor had done two things no dwarf in living memory could claim. He had killed the most powerful matron mother in Menzoberranzan, and he had freed the founder of his clan. Shortly after the siege, he handed the throne to Gauntlgrym, the first king, back where he belonged, and returned to Icewind Dale. Bruenor spent the next 6 years while Drizzt and Catti-brie sailed with Deutermont, reopening the dwarven mines in the valley beneath Kelvin's cairn with Regis at his side. A priest of Silverymoon had worked healing spells over his scarred face after the siege. Then one day in a shopkeeper's stall in Bryn Shander, Regis stepped to Bruenor's left and Bruenor tracked the movement. His eye had grown back within the folds of the scar. He grabbed Regis in a hug and swung him off his feet, then dropped him the moment he noticed people smiling and went straight back to yelling about rope. When Drizzt and Catti-brie finally returned, they carried information that brought the companions back together to battle the demon lord Ertu out on the sea of moving ice. Though Drizzt believed it was Zaknafein held prisoner by Ertu, it was actually Wulfgar. The Baelor had held him in the abyss all this time. The companions, reunited, fought the demon's hordes, banished Ertu, and freed Wulfgar. But 6 years at the hands of a demon had done something to the man that freedom couldn't immediately undo. One night, during a moment of intimacy, Wulfgar mistook Catti-brie for a creature of the abyss and struck her. Bruenor drove his axe into the earth and swore he'd give Wulfgar a beating that would make his years with Ertu seem easy. But Wulfgar was already gone, fled into the dark out of shame. Wulfgar had been his son. He had mourned the man for years, and now he was losing him again, this time to something his axe couldn't fix. After encountering a pirate wearing the brand of Aegis Fang, Bruenor and the companions began their search for Wulfgar and the hammer, fearing the worst may have happened. When they finally reunited with Wulfgar, Drizzt helped navigate the group through old memories until Wulfgar found the words to apologize to Catti-brie. Bruenor sat through it all with a scowl, then punched Wulfgar hard in the side, and through stifled tears told him he'd make a necklace out of his teeth if it ever happened again. Then word arrived that Gauntlgrym had died. Bruenor was king again, now the 10th king of Mithral Hall. Back on the throne, Bruenor led his forces north to meet an orcish tide. King Obold Many-Arrows had raised an orc horde, the likes of which the north had rarely seen, and when it crashed against the town of Shallows, Bruenor stood in the breach. He fought through the battle with a sword wound to his lung. When the orcs finally pulled back, the battle won at a terrible cost. Bruenor fell. He was carried back to Mithral Hall on a wagon, barely breathing. Drizzt was separated from the group and believed dead. With Bruenor incapacitated and his general Dagnabbit killed, the clan fought on without its king for weeks, holding the walls while their leader lay near death. Regis found the way back to him. Using his ruby pendant, the halfling went into the dying dwarf's fading consciousness and told him his people were fighting without their king. His cleric, Cordio, channeled the healing through, then, when Bruenor seemed to be slipping away even still, offered him release. Moradin had welcomed him. He had earned his rest. But Bruenor opened his eyes wide at this, exclaiming, his home was surrounded by stinking orcs and giants, and he was about to lie down and die? To the cheers of his kin, Bruenor was back yet again. He held the line at Mithral Hall, then he led the counter-assault. The war ground on, brutal and costly. The orc horde was broken, but not destroyed, and Obold's territory remained a wound on the landscape outside Bruenor's door. Bruenor resisted peace with every instinct he had. When the conversation turned to treaties, his answer was Moradin hadn't let him come back from the edge of death to sign anything with a pig-faced orc. But the math of the war was undeniable, and the treaty came. The Treaty of Garam's Gorge, Bruenor's name on an agreement with Obold Many-Arrows, marked him as a revolutionary among the dwarves of the north. He knew it, he didn't like it, but he signed it anyway. Ever restless on the throne, Bruenor began planning something else. Gauntlgrym, the ancient seat of the Delzoun dwarves, lost for centuries, had become his new obsession. Moradin had pulled him back from death for a reason, and he intended to find it. Catti-brie married Drizzt, and for a time the world was good. Then the spell plague struck, the weave collapsing across Faerun, and Catti-brie fell into a waking stupor, her mind lost somewhere between past and present. Regis, attempting to pull her out with the ruby pendant, became afflicted as well. Drizzt and Bruenor took them to Spirit Soaring, seeking a cure from the priest Catterly, but a fight against the Ghost King ensued. They destroyed the abomination, but Catterly gave everything, pursuing the creature into the Shadow Plane and sealing it there forever. On that final night, Mialiki's unicorn came for Catti-brie and Regis. It carried them into the stone, and they were gone. With Wulfgar already departed to live out his days with the tribe of the Elk, the companions were now just Drizzt, Bruenor, and Guinevere. After the loss of Catti-brie and Regis, Bruenor did what he always did. He found a direction and started walking. He publicly faked his death, announced to Mithral Hall and the Silver Marches that King Bruenor Battlehammer had died on the 5th day of the 6th month of the Year of True Omens. He left Mithral Hall to Bannock Brawnanvil and walked west into the open road. Drizzt went with him. The search lasted decades. Drizzt and an aging Bruenor, two old friends walking an impossibly long road toward a city most believed didn't exist. But then they found it. Gauntlgrym, the ancient seat of the Delzoun dwarves, lost for centuries, was real, and it was everything Bruenor had believed it to be. The Lich Valindra Shadowmantle had sent a pit fiend into the halls with the intention of freeing Megera, the fire primordial bound at the city's heart, and destroying the entire Neverwinter region. Bruenor met the fiend at the ledge above the primordial's pit and refused to move. Before the battle, Bruenor had sat on the ancient throne of Gauntlgrym's kings. Centuries of Delzoun memory flooded through his blood, the kings of old, the making of the Great Forge, the first lighting of the primordial. When he rose from that chair, he seemed to swell, muscles thickening, eyes flaring with something beyond the merely mortal. What met the fiend at the ledge above the primordial's pit was Bruenor Battlehammer carrying the weight of every Delzoun king who had ever ruled, powered by the throne's infusion. He took the fight blow by blow, absorbing hits that should have shattered him, driving the pit fiend back step by step until he split its skull with his axe, lifted its dying body over his head, and threw it into the fire. And then he fell. His loyal friend Puent was there, mortally wounded himself. The battle rager crawled to Bruenor's side, hoisted him up, and helped him reach the lever to seal away the primordial. Together they pulled it, and Gauntlgrym was saved. Puent died beside the lever. Drizzt reached Bruenor and turned him over. The dwarf was still alive, just long enough to look up at his oldest friend and speak his last words. "I found it, elf. I found me answers. I found me peace." And that was the end of Bruenor Battlehammer. Bruenor is gruff and stubborn, fierce and loyal, unyielding in the face of danger or challenge, and has the capacity to explore things more deeply than his surface suggests. His story is fundamentally about family, belonging, and legacy, specifically the homelands he refused to let be forgotten, and whether a king is defined by the throne or the people he'd die for. His clarity of purpose is his character, and it reminds me of the greatest of father figures. Bruenor's tale is not finished here, but this was a good stopping point for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you find value in this channel, consider supporting me over on Patreon. I'll be releasing my custom build of Bruenor Battlehammer for 5.5e over there shortly, adding to a plethora of bonus content I make every week for supporters. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week for more lore from the Forgotten Realms and the Legend of Drizzt.